The morning sun cast long shadows across Blackhawk Air Force Base as Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped out of her rental car, a modest sedan that looked almost comical next to the rows of military vehicles surrounding the pilot training facility. She carried a single flight bag over her shoulder, its civilian aviation patches marking her as an outsider in this world of military precision. The sound of jet engines roared overhead as F-16 Fighting Falcons completed their morning training runs, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the Nevada sky like silver daggers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah paused at the main gate, checking her watch against the appointment time printed on the official letter in her hand. She was early, as always. A habit formed during countless hours of civilian flight instruction, where punctuality meant the difference between keeping students and losing them to competitors. The guard at the checkpoint barely glanced at her credentials before waving her through, his attention already shifting to the next vehicle in line. As she walked toward the imposing concrete structure that housed the Advanced Combat Training Simulator, Sarah couldn't help but notice the stares from uniformed personnel. Some curious, others dismissive, all wondering what a civilian pilot was doing on their base. Her flight suit bore the logo of Horizon Flight Academy, a small civilian training school in Arizona that specialized in teaching weekend warriors and aspiring commercial pilots. It seemed almost quaint compared to the military patches and insignia surrounding her. The invitation to participate in the military's new cross-training evaluation program had arrived 3 weeks earlier, printed on official Department of Defense letterhead and signed by Colonel Patricia Williams, Director of Pilot Development. Sarah had read the letter 3 times before believing it was real. The program aimed to assess whether civilian-trained pilots could adapt to military combat scenarios, part of a broader initiative to understand different training methodologies and their effectiveness in high-stress situations. Sarah had been selected based on her unconventional background. Unlike most civilian flight instructors who had followed traditional paths through commercial aviation programs, she had learned to fly in her grandfather's Cessna 172 on a dusty airstrip in rural Montana. Her training had been organic, intuitive, shaped by necessity rather than standardized curriculum. She had soloed at 16, earned her commercial license at 19, and had been teaching others to fly for the past 6 years. What made her selection even more unusual was her complete lack of military experience. While other participants in the program were typically former military pilots who had transitioned to civilian careers, Sarah represented pure civilian aviation. Her logbook contained thousands of hours in small aircraft, teaching nervous students how to navigate mountain airports and emergency procedures, but not a single minute in anything larger than a twin-engine Beechcraft. The letter had explained that she would be evaluated alongside a group of elite military pilots in advanced combat simulations. The goal was to determine whether unconventional training produced transferable skills that could benefit military aviation. Sarah had almost declined the invitation, certain that she would be out of her league among fighter pilots and military aviators. But something about the challenge had appealed to her, the same instinct that had driven her to attempt mountain flying in challenging weather when other instructors stayed grounded. She had spent the 3 weeks since receiving the invitation studying everything she could find about military aviation tactics and procedures. Her small apartment had become cluttered with borrowed textbooks on aerial combat, downloaded technical manuals, and printed articles about fighter aircraft capabilities. She had practiced with commercial flight simulators, pushing herself to understand the fundamentals of high-performance aircraft handling. Still, she knew that no amount of preparation could fully bridge the gap between flying a Cessna and controlling an F-16 simulation. The training facility's main building was a monument to military efficiency, all sharp angles and purposeful design. Sarah entered through glass doors that opened onto a reception area dominated by displays showcasing the base's history and achievements. Photographs of distinguished pilots lined the walls, their faces serious and confident beneath their flight helmets. She approached the reception desk, where a uniformed airman directed her to the third-floor briefing room. The elevator ride seemed to last forever as Sarah mentally reviewed what she knew about the other participants. According to the program materials she had received, there would be 8 pilots total. 7 were current or former military aviators, with extensive combat training and experience in various aircraft types. Then there was her, the anomaly in their carefully selected group. The briefing room was already occupied when Sarah arrived. 7 men in flight suits turned to look at her as she entered, their conversations pausing momentarily before resuming in slightly lower tones. She recognized the type immediately, having encountered similar personalities during her brief interactions with military pilots at civilian airshows. Confident, skilled, and accustomed to being among the best at what they did. Captain Michael Torres was the first to approach her, his handshake firm and his smile genuine. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent significant time in cockpits, with the characteristic tan lines from wearing flight helmets and the slightly squinted eyes of someone accustomed to scanning distant horizons. He introduced himself as a current F-16 pilot with 2 deployments and over 1,000 hours in fighter aircraft. Major David Kim followed, his bearing ramrod straight and his manner more formal than Torres. He flew F-22 Raptors, he explained, the Air Force's most advanced fighter aircraft. His tone carried the subtle implication that he was accustomed to operating the most sophisticated machinery the military had to offer. When Sarah mentioned that she primarily flew Cessnas, his polite smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The remaining pilots introduced themselves with similar credentials: Captain Jason Murphy from F-15 Strike Eagles, Major Robert Anderson, who specialized in close air support missions, Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Parker with experience in multiple fighter platforms, Captain Christopher Lee, who had recently transitioned from Navy F/A-18 Super Hornets to Air Force operations, and Major Anthony Rodriguez, who served as an instructor pilot for advanced combat training. Each introduction reinforced Sarah's growing awareness of how different her background was from theirs. These men had trained at the Air Force Academy or through ROTC programs, had attended specialized military flight schools, and had spent years mastering the complexities of high-performance military aircraft. Their conversation flowed easily between technical discussions of aircraft capabilities, shared experiences from deployments, and inside jokes about military culture that Sarah didn't understand. She found herself sitting slightly apart from the group, listening to their exchanges while trying to absorb as much information as possible. They discussed G-force tolerances, weapon systems, electronic countermeasures, and tactical formations, with the casual familiarity of experts in their field. When the conversation occasionally turned to civilian aviation, it was usually in the context of transitioning to airline careers after military service, treating civilian flying as a step down from the excitement and challenge of military operations. Colonel Williams entered the briefing room precisely at the scheduled time, her presence immediately commanding attention from all 8 pilots. She was a woman in her early 50s with graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her flight suit bore the wings of a master pilot and ribbons indicating extensive operational experience. She carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from years of proving herself in a male-dominated field. The colonel's briefing was comprehensive and detailed, explaining the evaluation program's objectives and methodology. Over the next week, all participants would undergo a series of progressively challenging flight simulations designed to test their adaptability, decision-making under pressure, and ability to master unfamiliar aircraft systems. The simulations would begin with basic flight operations and advance through complex combat scenarios. What made the program unique, Colonel Williams explained, was its use of the military's most advanced flight simulation technology. The simulators were exact replicas of F-16 Fighting Falcon cockpits, complete with every switch, display, and control found in the actual aircraft. The visual systems provided photorealistic environments, while motion platforms replicated the physical sensations of high-performance flight. The scenarios would be indistinguishable from actual combat missions, except for the absence of real danger. The evaluation criteria would focus on several key areas. Technical proficiency measured how quickly participants could master the aircraft systems and controls. Tactical awareness assessed their ability to understand and respond to combat situations. Decision-making under pressure examined how they handled unexpected emergencies and time-critical choices. Finally, adaptability measured how well they adjusted their civilian or previous military training to new situations and requirements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Colonel Williams emphasized that the program was experimental, designed to gather data rather than rank participants against each other. However, Sarah noticed the subtle competitive tension that had already begun to develop among the military pilots. Despite the colonel's assurances about cooperation and learning, These were men accustomed to being measured and ranked, to competing for promotions and choice assignments. The presence of a civilian pilot in their group seemed to intensify their need to demonstrate their superiority. As the briefing concluded, the colonel announced that they would begin with individual orientation sessions in the simulators. Each pilot would have 2 hours to familiarize themselves with the F-16's systems and basic flight characteristics before beginning the formal evaluation scenarios. The sessions would be conducted in alphabetical order by last name, which meant Sarah would go 6th, after most of the military pilots had their opportunity to showcase their abilities. The morning break gave Sarah her first real opportunity to interact with the other participants outside the formal briefing environment. She found herself in the hallway with Captain Torres, who seemed genuinely interested in her background rather than dismissive of it. He asked about mountain flying, expressing curiosity about the challenges of operating in high-altitude airports with unpredictable weather conditions. Their conversation was interrupted by Major Kim and Captain Murphy, who had overheard Torres's questions about civilian aviation. Kim's tone was polite but condescending as he asked Sarah about her experience with high-performance aircraft. When she admitted that her fastest aircraft was a turbocharged Cessna with a cruising speed of around 200 knots, Murphy barely suppressed a laugh. The contrast between her experience and theirs was stark in every measurable way. While she had accumulated significant flight time, it was all in aircraft that cruised at speeds these pilots considered barely above stalling speed for their jets. Her students were weekend pilots and aspiring commercial aviators, not combat-trained military personnel. Her most challenging flights involved navigating mountain weather and teaching emergency procedures, not engaging enemy aircraft or delivering precision weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Parker joined the conversation, his manner more diplomatic than Kim or Murphy, but equally skeptical about Sarah's presence in the program. He acknowledged that civilian pilots often developed excellent fundamental flying skills, but questioned whether those skills would translate to the high-stress, high-speed environment of combat aviation. His tone suggested he viewed the evaluation as an interesting academic exercise rather than a meaningful test of capability. Sarah listened to their discussion, aware that they were essentially talking around her rather than including her in the conversation. They debated the merits of different training philosophies, the advantages of military versus civilian flight instruction, and the challenges of transitioning between aircraft types. Their analysis was intelligent and well-informed, but it carried the implicit assumption that military training was inherently superior to civilian instruction. The first pilot called for his orientation session was Captain Lee, whose confidence was evident as he strode toward the simulator bay. The waiting area adjacent to the simulators featured large windows that allowed observers to watch the sessions, and Sarah found herself studying the F-16 cockpit mock-up with fascination. The complexity was overwhelming compared to the simple instruments and controls she was accustomed to in civilian aircraft. Captain Lee's session was impressive to watch. He settled into the simulator cockpit with the familiarity of someone who had spent countless hours in similar environments. His hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency as he worked through the startup procedures, his movements economical and precise. The instructor pilot supervising his session seemed pleased with his performance, offering minimal guidance as Lee demonstrated his proficiency with the aircraft systems. During the simulated flight portion, Lee's handling of the F-16 was smooth and confident. He executed standard maneuvers with ease, his radio communications crisp and professional. Sarah watched his control inputs on the external displays, noting how small and subtle his adjustments were compared to the larger control movements she was accustomed to making in her Cessna. The difference in aircraft responsiveness and sensitivity was clearly significant. Major Anderson went next, his session following a similar pattern of competent proficiency. He seemed particularly comfortable with the weapon systems, his military experience evident in how quickly he navigated through the complex targeting displays and armament controls. The instructor pilot made notes on his evaluation form, but his expression suggested that Anderson was performing as expected for someone with his background and experience. Captain Murphy's turn came third, and his approach to the simulator was noticeably more aggressive than his predecessors. He seemed eager to demonstrate his capabilities, pushing the aircraft harder during the maneuvering portions of his session. His radio calls were sharp and confident, his control inputs more dramatic. The instructor pilot had to remind him twice that this was an orientation session rather than a demonstration flight, but Murphy's enthusiasm was evident throughout his 2-hour block. Major Kim's session was perhaps the most technically proficient of the morning. His background in F-22 operations was apparent in his systematic approach to learning the F-16's systems. He asked detailed questions about the differences between the two aircraft types, demonstrating his deep understanding of advanced fighter capabilities. His flight performance was flawless, every maneuver executed with textbook precision. Lieutenant Colonel Parker approached his session with the methodical thoroughness of an experienced instructor pilot. His questions were thoughtful and comprehensive, focused on understanding not just how to operate the systems, but why they were designed as they were. His flying was conservative but extremely competent, demonstrating the judgment that came with extensive experience in high-performance aircraft. As Sarah's turn approached, she felt the weight of expectation from the other participants. Their sessions had established a clear standard of performance, each pilot demonstrating the competence expected from someone with military flight training. The instructor pilot who would supervise her session was Major Lisa Thompson, a former F-16 pilot who now served as the chief simulator instructor for the base. Major Thompson's briefing was thorough and patient, clearly designed for someone who might not be familiar with military aircraft systems. She explained the F-16's basic layout, pointing out the primary flight instruments, engine controls, and navigation systems. Her manner was professional but encouraging, treating Sarah as a serious participant rather than a curiosity. The F-16 cockpit was a revelation in complexity compared to anything Sarah had experienced. Multiple display screens showed information about aircraft systems, navigation, and tactical situations. The control stick was surrounded by switches and buttons that controlled everything from radio frequencies to weapon systems. The heads-up display projected critical flight information directly onto the windscreen, allowing pilots to monitor their instruments without looking down at the panel. Sarah's first challenge was simply starting the aircraft. The startup checklist was lengthy and precise, each step critical to proper system operation. She worked through the procedures methodically, asking questions when she was uncertain about switch positions or display indications. Major Thompson provided guidance without being condescending, treating each question as legitimate rather than evidence of inadequate preparation. When they finally reached the point of actual flight simulation, Sarah felt both excitement and anxiety. The F-16's response to control inputs was unlike anything she had experienced. The aircraft was incredibly sensitive, requiring much smaller movements than she was accustomed to making. Her first attempts at basic maneuvers were clumsy and over-controlled, the aircraft's responses exaggerated by her civilian-trained reflexes. Major Thompson remained patient as Sarah adapted to the different flight characteristics. The F-16's power-to-weight ratio meant that throttle adjustments produced immediate and dramatic changes in performance. The aircraft stability systems helped manage some of the complexity, but Sarah still struggled with the fundamental differences between this high-performance fighter and the docile training aircraft she was used to flying. Her radio communications were another area of adjustment. Military aviation used specific phraseology and procedures that were different from civilian operations. Sarah's civilian training had emphasized clear communication, but the precise format and terminology of military radio work required conscious effort to remember and implement correctly. Despite the challenges, Sarah began to find her rhythm as the session progressed. Her fundamental flying skills, developed through thousands of hours of civilian instruction, provided a foundation that she could build upon. Her understanding of basic aerodynamics and aircraft control translated to the F-16, even if the specific techniques required modification. What surprised Major Thompson was Sarah's intuitive approach to some of the flight challenges they practiced. When they simulated an engine emergency, Sarah's response was creative and effective, using techniques that weren't in the standard military playbook but made perfect sense from a basic flying perspective. Her civilian training had emphasized improvisation and adaptability, skills that proved valuable even in this highly regimented environment. The other pilots had gathered in the observation area to watch Sarah's session, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. She could see them through the cockpit windows, their body language suggesting they were critiquing her performance and finding it wanting. Their presence added pressure to an already challenging situation, but Sarah tried to focus on learning rather than performing for an audience. As her 2-hour orientation session concluded, Sarah felt both exhausted and exhilarated. She had successfully operated an F-16 simulator, something that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. Her performance had been far from perfect, but she had demonstrated that civilian pilots could adapt to military aircraft systems given proper instruction and sufficient time. Major Thompson's debrief was encouraging while remaining realistic about the challenges ahead. Sarah's fundamental flying skills were solid, but she would need to develop much greater proficiency with the F-16 systems and procedures to be competitive with the military pilots. The real evaluation scenarios would be far more demanding than the basic orientation flight, requiring quick decision-making and precise execution under pressure. The afternoon brought the first formal evaluation scenario, a basic navigation exercise that tested each pilot's ability to use the F-16 systems to plan and execute a cross-country flight. The scenario involved flying from their home base to a destination airport while managing fuel consumption, avoiding restricted airspace, and responding to air traffic control instructions. Captain Torres went first, his navigation skills sharp and his execution smooth. He demonstrated familiarity with military navigation procedures and systems, completing the scenario efficiently and professionally. His radio work was crisp, his fuel management appropriate, and his arrival at the destination precisely on time and on course. Major Kim's approach was more methodical, using the F-16's advanced navigation systems to optimize his route and fuel consumption. His performance was technically superior to Torres's, demonstrating greater familiarity with the aircraft's capabilities. He completed the scenario with fuel to spare and perfect timing, earning obvious approval from the evaluating instructors. The pattern continued through the other military pilots, each demonstrating competence and professionalism. Captain Murphy was perhaps the most aggressive in his approach, choosing a more direct route that required careful fuel management but saved time. Major Anderson showed excellent judgment in his decision-making, while Lieutenant Colonel Parker's conservative approach reflected his instructor background. When Sarah's turn came for the navigation scenario, she felt the pressure of following 5 exemplary performances. Her approach was different from the military pilots, relying more on basic navigation principles and less on the F-16's automated systems. Her civilian training had emphasized understanding fundamental navigation concepts, rather than depending entirely on sophisticated equipment. Her flight planning was thorough but unconventional, using techniques she had learned from mountain flying where GPS systems could be unreliable and backup navigation methods were essential. She plotted multiple checkpoints and calculated fuel requirements using formulas she had memorized rather than depending solely on the aircraft's fuel management system. During the actual flight simulation, Sarah's navigation was accurate, but her techniques were clearly different from military standards. She cross-checked her position using multiple methods, maintained constant awareness of her fuel state, and flew precise headings and altitudes. Her radio communications improved throughout the flight as she became more comfortable with military phraseology. What distinguished Sarah's performance was her constant vigilance and backup planning. While the military pilots had confidence in their aircraft systems and procedures, Sarah approached the scenario with the caution of someone accustomed to flying aircraft with less sophisticated equipment. She had contingency plans for equipment failures and alternative routes in case of unexpected weather or airspace restrictions. The evaluating instructors noted these differences in their reports, recognizing that Sarah's approach reflected different training and experience rather than deficiency. Her civilian background had taught her to be self-reliant and creative in problem-solving, qualities that could be valuable even in a high-technology environment. As the first day of evaluations concluded, the pilots gathered in the debriefing room to discuss their experiences and receive feedback from the instructors. Colonel Williams led the discussion, encouraging open communication about the challenges and insights each pilot had encountered during their simulator sessions. The military pilots were generous in their praise for the F-16 simulation's realism and the quality of instruction they had received. They discussed technical aspects of the aircraft systems and compared the simulation to their experiences in actual F-16s. Their comfort level with the entire process was evident in their confident participation in the discussion. Sarah's contributions to the debrief were more tentative, focusing on her learning process rather than demonstrating expertise. She asked questions about military procedures and systems, seeking to understand the rationale behind different approaches and techniques. Her questions revealed both her inexperience with military aviation and her genuine interest in learning and improving. The day had been challenging but encouraging for Sarah. She had proven to herself that she could operate in this environment, even if her performance wasn't yet competitive with the military pilots. The fundamental flying skills she had developed through civilian training provided a foundation, but she clearly had significant work ahead to master the specific demands of military aviation. As the pilots prepared to leave for the day, Captain Torres approached Sarah with advice about preparing for the more challenging scenarios ahead. He suggested studying specific military publications about tactical procedures and recommended simulator practice opportunities that might be available during their free time. Major Kim's interaction was more formal but equally helpful, offering technical insights about F-16 systems that might help Sarah improve her proficiency. His manner remained somewhat condescending, but his advice was sound and demonstrated a grudging respect for her commitment to the program. The evening gave Sarah time to reflect on the day's experiences and prepare for the challenges ahead. She reviewed her notes from the orientation and evaluation sessions, identifying areas where she needed improvement. The gap between her current skill level and the military pilot's expertise was significant, but not insurmountable with focused effort and determination. Her small base lodging room became a study area as she spread out technical manuals and procedure guides borrowed from the base library. She worked late into the night, memorizing systems layouts, radio procedures, and tactical concepts that were second nature to her military counterparts but completely new to her. The next morning brought more complex evaluation scenarios designed to test the pilot's ability to handle emergencies and unexpected situations. These scenarios would push beyond basic flying skills to examine decision-making under pressure and adaptability to rapidly changing circumstances. Sarah arrived at the simulator facility early, using the extra time to review procedures and mentally prepare for the challenges ahead. She found Major Thompson already in the briefing room, reviewing evaluation materials and preparing for the day's activities. Their conversation revealed that the upcoming scenarios would be significantly more demanding than the previous day's exercises. Emergency procedures, system failures, weather challenges, and time-critical decisions would all be part of the evaluation process. These scenarios were designed to simulate the stress and complexity of actual combat operations. The other pilots arrived with their characteristic confidence. Their conversations focused on anticipating the challenges they might face and strategies for handling various emergency situations. Their military training had prepared them for exactly these types of scenarios, and their comfort with high-stress flying was evident in their relaxed demeanor. Captain Murphy was particularly vocal about his eagerness to tackle more challenging scenarios, expressing confidence that his combat experience would give him advantages in handling emergencies. Major Kim discussed the F-22's emergency procedures, drawing parallels that might help him in the F-16 simulations. As the day's evaluations began, it became clear that these scenarios would separate the pilots based on their ability to handle pressure and make quick decisions. The military pilot's advantage was not just in their familiarity with aircraft systems, but in their training and experience dealing with emergency situations under stress. Sarah watched the early sessions with growing apprehension, recognizing that her civilian training had provided limited exposure to the types of emergencies and decisions these scenarios would require. Her experience was primarily with routine civilian flying operations, not the high-stress life-and-death situations that military pilots train for regularly. The stage was set for the more challenging evaluations that would truly test whether civilian flying experience could compete with military training in demanding scenarios. Sarah's civilian background had carried her through the basic evaluations, but the real test of her adaptability and skill was still ahead. The second day's emergency scenarios began, with Captain Lee facing a simulated engine failure during takeoff, one of the most critical emergencies any pilot could encounter. Sarah watched from the observation deck as Lee handled the situation with textbook precision, immediately recognizing the problem, executing proper emergency procedures, and bringing the aircraft to a safe landing. His performance was flawless, demonstrating the kind of training and muscle memory that military pilots developed through countless hours of emergency procedure practice. Major Anderson followed with a different emergency scenario, involving multiple system failures during flight. The simulation presented cascading problems that required prioritization and quick decision-making. Anderson worked through the emergencies systematically, identifying the most critical issues first and managing the less urgent problems as time and workload permitted. His performance showcased the analytical thinking and prioritization skills that military training emphasized. Captain Murphy faced a weather-related emergency, flying into rapidly deteriorating conditions that required an immediate decision about whether to continue to the destination or divert to an alternate airport. His aggressive flying style translated into decisive action, choosing to divert early rather than risk getting trapped in dangerous weather. The instructors noted his good judgment in recognizing when to abandon the original plan in favor of safety. Major Kim's scenario involved a combination of mechanical problems and simulated combat situations, requiring him to handle aircraft emergencies while maintaining tactical awareness. His performance was particularly impressive, demonstrating his ability to compartmentalize problems and maintain focus on multiple priorities simultaneously. His F-22 background served him well in managing complex scenarios with multiple moving parts. Lieutenant Colonel Parker was presented with a scenario involving navigation system failures that required him to complete his mission using backup instruments and dead reckoning navigation. His instructor pilot background was evident in his methodical approach to the problem, working through alternative navigation methods with calm precision. He completed the scenario successfully while maintaining perfect situational awareness throughout the emergency. Captain Torres faced a fuel emergency that required careful calculations and decision-making about whether sufficient fuel remained to reach the destination. His performance demonstrated excellent judgment and mathematical skills, accurately calculating fuel consumption rates and making the correct decision to divert to a closer airport with adequate fuel reserves remaining. When Sarah's turn arrived for the emergency scenarios, she felt the familiar mixture of anxiety and determination that had characterized her participation in the program. Major Thompson briefed her on the scenario, a simulated electrical system failure that would affect multiple aircraft systems and require alternative procedures for navigation and communication. The scenario began normally, with Sarah executing a routine departure and climb to cruise altitude. Her handling of the F-16 had improved significantly since her first orientation session, her control inputs smoother and more precise. She was beginning to develop a feel for the aircraft's responsiveness and characteristics. Halfway through the simulated flight, warning lights began illuminating on the instrument panel as the electrical system failure cascaded through various aircraft systems. Sarah's initial response was to identify and isolate the problem, using troubleshooting procedures she had learned from her civilian training. Her approach was methodical and careful, working through potential solutions systematically. What distinguished Sarah's handling of the emergency was her creative problem-solving approach. While the military pilots had relied heavily on memorized emergency procedures specific to the F-16, Sarah drew from her broader experience with various aircraft types and general emergency principles. She improvised solutions that weren't necessarily in the standard playbook, but were aerodynamically and mechanically sound. Her civilian training had emphasized understanding the why behind emergency procedures rather than just memorizing specific steps. This foundation allowed her to adapt when the standard procedures weren't entirely applicable to the specific combination of failures she was experiencing. She developed workaround solutions that accomplished the same objectives as the prescribed procedures but used different methods. The evaluating instructors were surprised by Sarah's unconventional but effective approach to the emergency. While her solutions weren't standard military procedures, they demonstrated solid understanding of aircraft systems and creative thinking under pressure. Her performance wasn't as polished as the military pilots, but it showed promise and adaptability. Major Thompson's debrief with Sarah was encouraging, noting that her civilian training had provided valuable perspective on problem-solving approaches. While she needed to become more familiar with standard military procedures, her ability to think creatively and adapt to unexpected situations was a valuable asset that shouldn't be discouraged. The afternoon brought tactical scenarios designed to test the pilot's ability to think strategically and make decisions in simulated combat environments. These scenarios would push beyond basic flying skills and emergency procedures into the realm of tactical thinking and situational awareness that was central to military aviation. The first tactical scenario involved a simulated air-to-air combat situation, where pilots had to identify, track, and engage enemy aircraft while managing their own defensive positioning. Captain Torres approached this scenario with obvious familiarity, his radio communications using proper tactical terminology, and his maneuvering demonstrating understanding of air combat principles. Major Kim's tactical performance was exceptional, drawing from his F-22 experience to demonstrate advanced understanding of air-to-air combat dynamics. His positioning, timing, and decision-making reflected sophisticated tactical training and experience. He completed the scenario with a successful engagement while maintaining excellent situational awareness throughout the encounter. Captain Murphy's aggressive flying style served him well in the tactical scenarios, his willingness to push the aircraft's capabilities allowing him to gain advantageous positions during simulated combat. His performance demonstrated the confidence and assertiveness that successful fighter pilots needed in air-to-air engagements. Major Anderson's tactical approach reflected his close air support background, focusing on precision and careful target identification rather than aggressive maneuvering. His performance was methodical and professional, demonstrating different tactical skills than pure air-to-air combat but equally valuable in military operations. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's tactical scenarios showcased his instructor background, his approach emphasizing proper procedures and safe practices while still achieving tactical objectives. His performance was conservative but effective, demonstrating the judgment that came with extensive experience and responsibility for training other pilots. When Sarah's turn came for tactical scenarios, she faced a significant disadvantage compared to the military pilots. Her civilian training had provided no exposure to air-to-air combat tactics, weapon systems, or military strategic thinking. She approached the scenarios with determination, but limited understanding of the tactical principles involved. Her first tactical scenario involved identifying and tracking multiple aircraft, while determining which represented threats and which were friendly forces. Sarah's performance was hesitant and uncertain, lacking the instant recognition and classification skills that military pilots developed through extensive training with aircraft identification and threat assessment. The weapons systems portion of the tactical scenarios presented additional challenges for Sarah. While she had learned to operate the basic F-16 systems during her orientation, the complex targeting and engagement procedures used in combat situations were entirely new to her. Her civilian training had focused on navigation, communication, and safety procedures, not on tracking and engaging targets. Despite her unfamiliarity with tactical procedures, Sarah demonstrated some unexpected strengths during the combat scenarios. Her mountain flying experience had taught her to think three-dimensionally and maintain awareness of terrain and obstacles, skills that translated surprisingly well to tactical maneuvering. Her understanding of aircraft performance limitations helped her recognize when she was pushing the F-16 beyond safe operating parameters. Her civilian instructor background also provided unexpected advantages in some scenarios. Teaching nervous students had developed her ability to maintain calm under pressure and think clearly when situations became chaotic. While she lacked tactical knowledge, her fundamental decision-making skills remained sound even in high-stress situations. The tactical scenario that proved most challenging for Sarah involved a simulated ground attack mission requiring precise navigation, target identification, and weapons delivery, while avoiding enemy air defenses. The complexity of managing multiple tasks simultaneously while flying at high speed and low altitude was overwhelming initially. Sarah's approach to the ground attack scenario reflected her civilian training emphasis on careful planning and methodical execution. She spent considerable time studying the target area and planning her approach route, using navigation techniques she had learned from mountain flying to identify key terrain features and checkpoints. During the actual simulated attack, Sarah's performance was cautious but effective. Her weapons delivery was less precise than the military pilots, but she successfully identified the target and completed the attack while avoiding simulated air defenses. Her conservative approach prioritized safety and mission completion over aggressive tactics. The evaluating instructors noted that Sarah's tactical performance showed significant room for improvement, but also demonstrated adaptability and sound judgment. While she clearly lacked the specific tactical training that military pilots possessed, her fundamental flying skills and decision-making abilities provided a foundation that could potentially be developed with additional training. Major Thompson's debrief after the tactical scenarios was honest about Sarah's limitations while acknowledging her potential. The gap between civilian and military tactical training was substantial, but Sarah's performance suggested that civilian pilots could potentially adapt to military tactical requirements given sufficient training time and proper instruction. The third day of evaluations introduced formation flying scenarios, testing the pilot's ability to maintain precise positioning relative to other aircraft while executing complex maneuvers. Formation flying required exceptional aircraft control, spatial awareness, and trust in other pilots' abilities. Captain Lee's formation flying was smooth and precise, his aircraft maintaining perfect positioning relative to the lead aircraft throughout complex maneuvers. His performance demonstrated the kind of stick and rudder skills that distinguished exceptional pilots from merely competent ones. His ability to make minute control adjustments to maintain formation position was impressive to observe. Major Anderson's formation flying reflected his military training emphasis on precision and discipline. His aircraft remained in perfect position regardless of the lead aircraft's maneuvers, demonstrating the kind of aircraft control that required hundreds of hours of practice to develop. His performance was technically flawless and professionally executed. Captain Murphy's aggressive flying style required some adjustment for formation flying, where smooth and predictable control inputs were more important than assertive maneuvering. His initial attempts were somewhat erratic, but he quickly adapted his technique to maintain proper formation discipline while still demonstrating excellent aircraft control. Major Kim's formation flying was exceptional, drawing from his F-22 experience with advanced formation techniques. His ability to anticipate the lead aircraft's maneuvers and maintain perfect positioning demonstrated sophisticated understanding of formation dynamics and exceptional piloting skills. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's formation flying was textbook perfect, his instructor background evident in his precise technique and smooth execution. His performance served as an example of proper formation flying principles, demonstrating the standards that military pilots were expected to achieve and maintain. Captain Torres approached formation flying with the confidence of someone who had extensive experience flying in close proximity to other aircraft. His performance was smooth and professional, maintaining proper spacing and positioning while executing increasingly complex formation maneuvers. Sarah's formation flying presented unique challenges given her civilian training background. While she had occasionally flown in loose formations during airshow practice sessions, she had never attempted the precise formation flying that military aviation required. The level of accuracy and trust required was unlike anything she had experienced in civilian aviation. Her initial attempts at formation flying were tentative and imprecise, her aircraft wandering slightly as she struggled to maintain exact positioning relative to the lead aircraft. The F-16's sensitivity required much smaller control inputs than she was accustomed to making, and her corrections tended to be slightly over-controlled initially. What helped Sarah's formation flying performance was her civilian instructor experience teaching students to fly in traffic patterns with other aircraft. While not formation flying per se, this experience had taught her to maintain awareness of other aircraft positions and predict their movements. These skills translated surprisingly well to formation flying once she adapted her control technique. Her mountain flying background also provided unexpected advantages in formation flying. Flying in mountainous terrain required constant awareness of spatial relationships and the ability to judge distances accurately. These skills helped Sarah maintain proper formation spacing and avoid dangerous proximity to other aircraft. As her formation flying session progressed, Sarah's performance improved noticeably. Her control inputs became smoother and more precise, her positioning more accurate and consistent. While she still lacked the polish and precision of the military pilots, she demonstrated the fundamental skills needed for formation flying. The evaluating instructors noted that Sarah's formation flying showed significant potential, despite her lack of specific training in this area. Her civilian flying experience had provided some transferable skills, and her improvement during the session suggested that she could develop competent formation flying abilities with additional practice. Major Thompson's feedback after the formation flying scenarios was cautiously optimistic about Sarah's potential in this area. While her initial performance was clearly below military standards, her rapid improvement during the session demonstrated good learning ability and fundamental aircraft control skills. The fourth day introduced night flying scenarios, testing the pilot's ability to operate effectively in low-visibility conditions using instruments and night vision equipment. Night flying required exceptional instrument flying skills and the ability to maintain situational awareness when visual references were limited or absent. The military pilots approached night flying scenarios with confidence born from extensive training in low-visibility operations. Their instrument flying skills were sharp and precise, their ability to interpret and act on instrument information instantaneous and accurate. Night flying was a routine part of military aviation that they had practiced extensively. Captain Torres demonstrated excellent night flying skills, his instrument scanning efficient and his aircraft control smooth and precise. His performance showed the kind of proficiency that came from regular practice flying in challenging visibility conditions as part of routine military operations. Major Kim's night flying was particularly impressive. His ability to transition seamlessly between visual and instrument references, demonstrating advanced piloting skills. His performance reflected the sophisticated training that F-22 pilots received in all-weather day-night operations. Captain Murphy's aggressive flying style required some modification for night flying, where smooth and deliberate control inputs were more important than assertive maneuvering. His adaptation to night flying techniques was quick and effective, demonstrating his fundamental piloting skills. Major Anderson's night flying reflected his close air support background, where operations often continued regardless of visibility conditions. His ability to maintain precise aircraft control and navigation accuracy in simulated night conditions was exceptional. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's night flying was textbook perfect, his instructor background evident in his methodical approach to instrument procedures and night flying techniques. His performance demonstrated the standards expected of military pilots operating in low visibility conditions. Sarah's night flying presented both challenges and unexpected advantages based on her civilian training background. While she had limited experience with night flying in her civilian career, her instrument flying skills were actually quite good, due to the emphasis civilian training placed on instrument proficiency for weather flying. Her civilian training had included extensive instrument flying practice, focusing on maintaining aircraft control and navigation accuracy when visual references were limited by weather conditions. These skills translated well to night flying scenarios, where instrument proficiency was crucial for safe operations. What challenged Sarah most about night flying was the use of night vision equipment and military-specific procedures for low-visibility operations. The technology and techniques were entirely new to her, requiring significant adaptation from her civilian instrument flying experience. Her performance in night flying scenarios was surprisingly competent, her instrument flying skills providing a solid foundation for operations in low-visibility conditions. While she lacked familiarity with military night flying procedures, her fundamental ability to control the aircraft using instruments was quite good. The evaluating instructors noted that Sarah's night flying performance was better than expected given her civilian background. Her instrument flying proficiency was actually superior to some areas where military pilots had shown advantages, suggesting that civilian training's emphasis on instrument flying provided valuable skills. Major Thompson's feedback after the night flying scenarios highlighted Sarah's unexpected strength in instrument flying, while noting areas where military-specific training would be beneficial. Her performance suggested that civilian pilots might bring some valuable skills to military night flying operations. The fifth day introduced high-stress scenarios designed to test the pilot's ability to maintain performance when experiencing significant physical and mental pressure. These scenarios combine multiple challenges simultaneously to create demanding situations that tested the limits of pilot capability and training. The high-stress scenarios began with G-force tolerance testing, measuring each pilot's ability to maintain consciousness and performance while experiencing the physical stresses of high-performance maneuvering. The military pilots approached this testing with confidence born from extensive experience with G-force exposure during their combat training. Captain Lee's G-force tolerance was excellent, his ability to maintain consciousness and aircraft control during high-G maneuvers reflecting his fighter pilot training and conditioning. His performance demonstrated the physical preparation that military pilots underwent to handle the demanding conditions of combat flying. Major Kim's G-force performance was exceptional, his F-22 background having exposed him to some of the most demanding physical conditions in military aviation. His ability to function effectively under high-G conditions while maintaining tactical awareness was impressive. Captain Murphy's aggressive flying style translated well to high-G scenarios, his willingness to push physical limits allowing him to maintain performance longer than some other pilots. His tolerance for physical discomfort served him well in demanding flight conditions. Major Anderson demonstrated good G-force tolerance combined with excellent judgment about when to moderate his maneuvering to maintain safety margins. His performance reflected the balance between aggressive flying and prudent decision-making that experienced military pilots developed. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's approach to high-G scenarios emphasized proper technique and gradual building of G-force, rather than immediately pushing to maximum limits. His instructor background was evident in his emphasis on proper procedures and safety considerations. Captain Torres showed solid G-force tolerance, combined with smooth aircraft control throughout high-stress maneuvering. His performance was consistent and professional, demonstrating the kind of reliability that military aviation required. Sarah's G-force tolerance testing revealed an unexpected area of relative strength compared to some other evaluation areas. While she lacked specific training in high-G flying techniques, her physical conditioning from mountain climbing and outdoor activities provided better tolerance than might have been expected. Her civilian flying experience had included some aerobatic training and upset recovery practice that had exposed her to moderate G-forces, though nothing approaching the levels experienced in fighter aircraft. This limited exposure had at least familiarized her with the physical sensations and basic techniques for maintaining consciousness under G-force. What helped Sarah's high G performance was her understanding of proper breathing techniques and muscle tensing procedures that she had learned during her aerobatic training. While not specifically designed for high G combat flying, these techniques provided some foundation for managing the physical stresses of high-performance maneuvering. Her performance during high G scenarios was better than expected but still clearly below the level of the military pilots. Her civilian training simply hadn't prepared her for the extreme physical demands of fighter aircraft operations, but she demonstrated enough tolerance to complete the scenarios successfully. The evaluating instructors noted that Sarah's G-force tolerance was adequate for basic high-performance flying, but would require significant conditioning and training to meet combat flying standards. Her performance suggested potential for improvement with proper physical training and conditioning programs. The stress testing continued with scenarios combining multiple emergency situations occurring simultaneously, designed to overwhelm pilots' ability to prioritize and manage complex problems under pressure. These scenarios tested not just technical proficiency, but mental toughness and decision-making under extreme stress. The military pilots approached multi-emergency scenarios with systematic training that had prepared them for exactly these types of situations. Their ability to compartmentalize problems, prioritize responses, and maintain performance under pressure reflected years of training designed to develop these specific capabilities. Captain Torres handled multiple emergencies with calm professionalism, working through problems in order of priority while maintaining aircraft control and situational awareness. His performance demonstrated the kind of mental discipline that military training developed for high-stress situations. Major Kim's performance during multi-emergency scenarios was outstanding. His ability to process multiple problems simultaneously while maintaining tactical awareness exceptional. His F-22 background had exposed him to some of the most complex and demanding scenarios in military aviation. Captain Murphy's aggressive personality served him well in high-stress scenarios, his willingness to make quick decisions and take decisive action allowing him to manage multiple problems effectively. His performance showed that assertiveness could be valuable in crisis situations. Major Anderson approached multi-emergency scenarios with methodical precision, working through problems systematically while maintaining awareness of changing priorities. His close air support background had prepared him for complex scenarios with multiple moving parts. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's handling of multi-emergency scenarios reflected his instructor training, emphasizing proper procedures and safe practices, even under extreme pressure. His performance demonstrated the value of thorough training and disciplined responses to emergency situations. Sarah's performance during multi-emergency scenarios revealed both strengths and weaknesses compared to the military pilots. Her civilian instructor experience had actually provided valuable preparation for managing multiple problems simultaneously, as teaching nervous students often required dealing with several issues at once. Her mountain flying background had also exposed her to situations where multiple weather and terrain challenges had to be managed simultaneously. While not equivalent to military emergency scenarios, this experience had taught her to prioritize problems and maintain focus under pressure. What challenged Sarah most was her unfamiliarity with F-16 emergency procedures and systems. While her problem-solving approach was sound, she had to work harder than the military pilots to remember proper procedures while simultaneously managing multiple emergencies. Her performance was creditable given her civilian background, demonstrating sound judgment and creative problem-solving even when specific procedures weren't immediately familiar. She successfully completed the scenarios, though, with less polish and efficiency than the military pilots. The evaluating instructors noted that Sarah's approach to multi-emergency scenarios showed promise, particularly her ability to remain calm and think clearly under pressure. Her civilian training had provided some valuable stress management skills that translated well to high-pressure flying situations. Major Thompson's feedback highlighted Sarah's mental toughness and problem-solving abilities while acknowledging that her unfamiliarity with military procedures created additional challenges during emergency scenarios. Her performance suggested potential for significant improvement with additional training. The final evaluation phase introduced competitive scenarios where pilots would be directly compared in head-to-head flying competitions. These scenarios would test not just individual proficiency, but the ability to perform under direct competitive pressure, while being directly compared to other highly skilled pilots. The competitive scenarios began with precision flying contests, measuring accuracy and maintaining specific airspeeds, altitudes, and headings. These tests measured basic stick and rudder skills and the ability to control aircraft precisely under observation and measurement. The military pilots approached precision flying with confidence, their training having emphasized accuracy and consistency in aircraft control. Their performance was uniformly excellent, demonstrating the kind of precision that military aviation required for formation flying, air-to-air refueling, and weapons delivery. Captain Lee's precision flying was exceptionally accurate, his ability to maintain exact parameters demonstrating superior aircraft control skills. His performance set a high standard that would be difficult for other pilots to match. Major Kim's precision reflected his F-22 background, where exceptional accuracy was required for advanced tactical operations. His performance was technically superior and demonstrated the kind of piloting skills that distinguished elite military aviators. Captain Murphy's precision flying required him to moderate his aggressive style in favor of smooth and consistent control inputs. His adaptation was successful, demonstrating excellent underlying aircraft control skills. Major Anderson's precision flying was steady and consistent, reflecting his military training's emphasis on reliability and accuracy. His performance was professional and competent throughout the various precision flying tests. Lieutenant Colonel Parker's precision flying was textbook perfect, his instructor background evident in his emphasis on proper technique and consistent performance. His flying served as an example of the standards expected from military pilots. Captain Torres demonstrated excellent precision flying skills, his performance smooth and accurate throughout the various tests. His consistency was particularly impressive, maintaining high standards across multiple different precision flying requirements. Sarah's precision flying revealed an unexpected area of relative strength compared to other evaluation areas. Her civilian instructor background had actually provided excellent preparation for precision flying, as teaching students required demonstrating exact aircraft control and modeling proper flying techniques. Her mountain flying experience had also emphasized precision, where accurate altitude and airspeed control were critical for safe operations in challenging terrain. These skills translated well to the precision flying tests, where her civilian training proved unexpectedly valuable. Her performance in precision flying was actually competitive with some of the military pilots, demonstrating that civilian training could develop excellent aircraft control skills. While her technique was different from military standards, her accuracy and consistency were impressive. The evaluating instructors were surprised by Sarah's strong performance in precision flying, noting that her civilian training had provided excellent preparation for this type of flying. Her results suggested that civilian pilots could match military standards in some areas of basic aircraft control. Major Thompson's feedback after the precision flying tests was highly positive, highlighting Sarah's excellent aircraft control skills and consistent performance. Her results in this area were among the best of any pilot in the evaluation program. The competitive scenarios continued with navigation races where pilots competed to reach designated checkpoints in minimum time while maintaining accuracy. These tests combined speed, efficiency, and precision in a directly competitive format. The military pilots approached navigation racing with strategies that reflected their tactical training and experience with time-critical missions. Their performance demonstrated sophisticated understanding of aircraft performance optimization and navigation efficiency. The navigation races revealed interesting differences in approach between the military pilots and Sarah. While the military pilots relied heavily on the F-16's advanced navigation systems and programmed routes, Sarah used more basic navigation techniques combined with her understanding of aircraft performance and terrain. Her civilian training had emphasized fuel efficiency and time management during cross-country flights, skills that translated surprisingly well to navigation racing. Her approach was less sophisticated technologically, but demonstrated sound understanding of basic navigation principles and aircraft performance optimization. Sarah's performance in navigation racing was competitive despite her different approach, demonstrating that civilian flying experience could provide valuable skills even in military contexts. Her results suggested that different training backgrounds could bring diverse strengths to aviation operations. The atmosphere in the debriefing room had shifted perceptibly over the past 5 days. What had begun as polite curiosity about the civilian pilot in their midst had evolved into something more complex among the military aviators. Sarah's unexpected competence in precision flying and her creative problem-solving approaches had begun to challenge their assumptions about civilian versus military training. Captain Murphy was the first to voice what several of the pilots were thinking during the morning briefing before the day's final evaluation scenarios. His tone carried a mixture of surprise and begrudging respect as he addressed Sarah directly for the first time since the program began. "I have to admit, Rodriguez," he said, using her last name in the casual military style that had previously excluded her. "Your precision flying yesterday was pretty impressive. Different technique than what we learned, but effective." Major Kim nodded in agreement, though his expression remained somewhat skeptical. "The navigation racing was interesting, too. Your fuel management was actually better than some of ours. Where did you learn to optimize performance like that?" Sarah felt a mixture of gratification and caution at their acknowledgement. The past 5 days had been a constant struggle to prove herself worthy of being in the same program as these elite pilots, and their recognition meant more than she had expected it would. "Mountain flying teaches you to squeeze every bit of performance out of your aircraft," she replied. "When you're dealing with high-density altitudes and unpredictable weather, fuel efficiency and performance optimization aren't optional skills." Lieutenant Colonel Parker leaned forward with genuine interest. "That's actually a good point. We tend to think of performance optimization in terms of combat maneuvering, but the principles are probably similar regardless of the application." The conversation was interrupted by Colonel Williams entering the briefing room with an announcement that would change the trajectory of the entire evaluation program. Her expression was serious as she addressed the assembled pilots. "Gentlemen, and Ms. Chen," she began, "I have an announcement about today's final evaluation scenario. Instead of the planned individual assessments, we're implementing a new competitive format that wasn't part of the original program design." The pilots exchanged glances, uncertain about what this change might mean for their evaluations. Colonel Williams continued with an explanation that would prove to be pivotal for everyone involved. "The Defense Department has decided to conduct a live demonstration for visiting congressional representatives and defense contractors. They want to see our evaluation program in action, specifically comparing different training methodologies in a head-to-head competitive scenario." Major Anderson raised his hand with a question that was on everyone's mind. "What kind of competitive scenario, ma'am? Individual dogfighting, formation competitions, or something else?" Colonel Williams smiled slightly, suggesting that the answer would be more interesting than they might expect. "All of the above, actually. We're implementing a comprehensive air combat tournament that will test every skill you've developed during this program. The scenario will be broadcast live to the demonstration audience." Captain Torres asked the obvious follow-up question. "How will the tournament be structured? Single elimination, round robin, or something else?" "The tournament will begin with elimination rounds testing different skills," Colonel Williams explained. "Navigation racing, precision flying, emergency response, tactical scenarios, and finally, air-to-air combat simulations. The top 4 pilots will advance to semifinals, then 2 will compete in a final championship round." The implications of this announcement were significant for all the pilots, but particularly for Sarah. Instead of being evaluated on her individual progress and learning, she would now be competing directly against elite military pilots, in front of an audience that included defense industry representatives and congressional oversight officials. Captain Lee voiced what several pilots were thinking. "Will the results of this tournament affect our official evaluations and records, or is it purely for demonstration purposes?" Colonel Williams' response confirmed their concerns. "The tournament results will be part of your official evaluation records. The Defense Department wants real competition with meaningful stakes, not a scripted demonstration." The briefing continued with detailed explanations of the tournament format and rules. Each elimination round would feature head-to-head competitions between paired pilots, with winners advancing and losers eliminated from the tournament. The pairing for the first round would be determined by random draw, meaning any pilot could face any other pilot in the opening round. Sarah felt her stomach tighten as she contemplated the implications. Her improvements during the program had been significant, but she remained the least experienced pilot in military aviation among the group. Facing any of the military pilots in direct competition would be challenging under the best circumstances, but doing so in front of an audience added pressure she had never experienced. Major Kim expressed concern about the fairness of including a civilian pilot in what was essentially a military competition. "Colonel, no disrespect to Chen, but is it appropriate to have a civilian pilot competing against military aviators in front of defense contractors? Doesn't that create potential embarrassment for the Air Force?" Colonel Williams' response was diplomatic but firm. The purpose of this evaluation program was to test whether different training methodologies could produce transferable skills. Including Chen in the tournament provides valuable data about civilian training effectiveness compared to military training. Captain Murphy added his perspective with characteristic bluntness. Plus, if she's been training alongside us for 5 days, she should be able to hold her own in competition. Otherwise, what was the point of including her in the program? The random draw for first-round pairings took place immediately after the briefing, with each pilot drawing numbered cards from a box. Sarah drew number 4, which would be paired against whoever drew number 3. When Captain Torres revealed that he had drawn number 3, Sarah felt both relief and apprehension. Of all the military pilots in the program, Torres had been the most encouraging and supportive of her participation. He had shared technical insights and offered helpful advice throughout the week. However, his kindness didn't change the fact that he was an experienced F-16 pilot with extensive combat training who would be a formidable opponent in any flying competition. The other first-round pairings matched Major Kim against Captain Lee, Major Anderson against Lieutenant Colonel Parker, and Captain Murphy would receive a bye into the semifinals due to the odd number of participants. The tournament format meant that 3 pilots would be eliminated in the first round, with only 4 advancing to the semifinals. Torres approached Sarah after the pairings were announced, his expression serious but encouraging. "Look, I know this isn't what any of us expected when we started this program, but you've earned your place here through 5 days of solid performance. Don't let the competition format psych you out." Sarah appreciated his gesture, though she suspected he was being overly optimistic about her chances. "Thanks, Michael. I know you're going to fly your best, and I wouldn't want it any other way. May the best pilot win." The first-round competition would begin with navigation racing, where paired pilots would compete to reach a series of checkpoints in minimum time while maintaining accuracy. This was an area where Sarah had shown unexpected competence during the previous day's evaluations, giving her some confidence about her chances. The tournament venue was the base's main simulator facility, which had been configured with additional viewing areas for the congressional representatives and defense contractor officials who would observe the competition. Large display screens showed aircraft positions, times, and performance data to the audience, making the competition transparent and dramatic. Sarah found herself in the preparation area adjacent to the simulator bay, going through her pre-flight checks and reviewing the navigation course they would be flying. The course was complex, requiring precise navigation through mountainous terrain while avoiding restricted airspace and reaching checkpoints within specified time windows. Torres was conducting his own preparation nearby, his approach methodical and professional. He showed no signs of overconfidence or complacency, treating Sarah as a serious competitor despite her civilian background. His respect for her abilities was evident in his careful preparation and focused demeanor. The audience had assembled in the viewing area, their conversations creating a background buzz of anticipation. Sarah could see congressional representatives in business suits, mixed with uniformed military officials and civilians wearing defense contractor identification badges. The presence of this audience added a dimension of pressure that none of the evaluation scenarios had included. Colonel Williams provided commentary for the audience as the first navigation race prepared to begin. Her explanations highlighted the complexity of the course and the skills required for successful completion, building dramatic tension for the competition. "Ladies and gentlemen, this navigation racing scenario tests 3 critical pilot skills," she announced. Precise navigation using both electronic systems and traditional methods, aircraft performance optimization for maximum efficiency, and decision-making under time pressure. Both pilots will fly identical courses, with success measured by accuracy and speed. The racing format required both pilots to begin simultaneously and follow the same route to the same checkpoints. Their progress would be tracked in real time, allowing the audience to follow the competition as it developed. The pilot who completed the course fastest while hitting all checkpoints accurately would advance to the semifinals. Sarah settled into her simulator cockpit, working through the familiar startup procedures that had become second nature during her week of training. Her confidence with the F-16 systems had improved dramatically, though she still lacked the instinctive familiarity that Torres possessed from his extensive experience in the actual aircraft. The course began with a departure from Black Hawk Air Force Base toward a mountain checkpoint 50 miles to the northeast. From there, pilots would navigate to a desert checkpoint in the southeast, then to a final checkpoint near a simulated enemy air defense zone before returning to base. The total course distance was approximately 200 miles, with challenging terrain and weather conditions. At the start signal, both aircraft began their departures simultaneously. Sarah's strategy was based on her civilian flying experience with cross-country navigation and fuel efficiency. She had planned a route that optimized altitude and power settings for maximum ground speed while maintaining sufficient fuel reserves for contingencies. Torres took a more direct approach, using the F-16's advanced navigation systems to plot the most efficient route between checkpoints. His military training emphasized rapid mission completion and aggressive performance optimization, accepting higher fuel consumption in exchange for reduced flight time. The first checkpoint was reached within seconds of each other, both pilots demonstrating accurate navigation and good course planning. Sarah's civilian training in dead reckoning and pilotage navigation proved valuable as backup to the electronic systems, while Torres relied more heavily on the F-16's sophisticated navigation computers. The second leg of the race revealed different strengths and approaches between the two pilots. Sarah's mountain flying experience allowed her to use terrain and wind patterns effectively, gaining slight advantages through superior understanding of atmospheric conditions. Torres maintained his edge through aggressive power management and precise electronic navigation. As they approached the desert checkpoint, Sarah had gained a slight lead through her efficient use of wind patterns and optimal altitude selection. Her civilian training in weather flying and performance optimization was proving competitive with Torres's military training, much to the surprise of the observing audience. The final leg toward the simulated enemy air defense zone required careful navigation to avoid detection while maintaining speed toward the finish line. This scenario favored Torres's military training in tactical flying and threat avoidance, areas where Sarah's civilian background provided limited preparation. However, Sarah's approach to the threat avoidance portion demonstrated the creative thinking that had characterized her performance throughout the evaluation program. Instead of following standard military threat avoidance procedures that she didn't know well, she used terrain masking techniques adapted from her mountain flying experience. Her use of valleys and ridgelines to avoid simulated radar coverage was unconventional but effective, allowing her to maintain speed while staying undetected. Torres used more traditional military tactics that were technically superior but required more complex maneuvering that cost time. The finish line approach became a dramatic sprint as both pilots pushed their aircraft to maximum performance for the final miles. Sarah's fuel management had left her with more reserve fuel than Torres, allowing her to use higher power settings for the final approach without risking fuel exhaustion. The result was stunning for everyone watching, including Sarah herself. She crossed the finish line 12 seconds ahead of Torres, completing the course with better time and equal accuracy in checkpoint navigation. The audience response was a mixture of surprise and appreciation for the unexpected outcome. Torres's reaction was gracious and professional as they completed their post-flight debriefs. "Outstanding flying, Sarah. Your route planning and fuel management were superior to mine. You earned that win fair and square." Colonel Williams's commentary to the audience emphasized the significance of the result. "What we've just witnessed demonstrates that different training methodologies can produce competitive results even at the highest levels of aviation performance." Ms. Chen's civilian training provided skills that proved equal to military training in this scenario. The other first-round competitions proceeded with results that were more predictable. Major Kim defeated Captain Lee in a closely contested navigation race that showcased both pilots' exceptional skills. Major Anderson outflew Lieutenant Colonel Parker through superior tactical decision-making during the threat avoidance portions of their course. The semifinals pairings matched Sarah against Major Anderson, while Major Kim would face Captain Murphy in the other semifinal. Sarah's advancement to the semifinals had surprised everyone, including herself, but her confidence was growing with each successful competition. Major Anderson approached their semifinal pairing with obvious respect for Sarah's abilities, having witnessed her upset victory over Torres in the first round. His pre-competition demeanor was serious and focused, treating her as a legitimate threat rather than an interesting curiosity. The semifinal competition format shifted from navigation racing to tactical scenarios, testing pilots' ability to complete mission objectives while dealing with simulated threats and emergencies. This format played more directly to military training advantages, presenting Sarah with her most challenging competition yet. The tactical scenario required pilots to penetrate simulated enemy airspace, locate and identify ground targets, and return to base while avoiding enemy air defenses and fighter aircraft. Success would be measured by mission completion, accuracy of target identification, and survival through the threat environment. Sarah's preparation for the tactical semi-final drew on everything she had learned during the week's training, but she remained acutely aware that this type of mission was far outside her civilian experience. Her strategy focused on careful planning and conservative execution, prioritizing mission completion over aggressive tactics. Anderson's approach reflected his close air support background and extensive experience with exactly this type of mission. His planning was sophisticated and comprehensive, incorporating threat analysis, contingency planning, and tactical procedures that Sarah was still learning. The tactical simulation began, with both pilots departing toward the simulated enemy territory. Sarah's route planning emphasized terrain masking and predictable flight paths that would be difficult for enemy systems to track. Anderson chose a more direct approach that relied on speed and electronic countermeasures to penetrate enemy defenses. The target area contained multiple potential objectives, requiring pilots to identify the correct targets while avoiding decoys and civilian structures. Sarah's systematic approach to target identification drew on her civilian training in airspace recognition and chart reading, skills that translated surprisingly well to tactical target analysis. Anderson's target identification was faster and more confident, reflecting his military training in threat recognition and target prioritization. However, his aggressive approach through the enemy air defenses triggered more simulated threat responses than Sarah's cautious route. The return journey became the decisive phase of the competition as both pilots faced simulated enemy fighter aircraft attempting to intercept them before they could escape to friendly territory. This air-to-air combat scenario was heavily weighted toward Anderson's military training and experience. Sarah's approach to the air-to-air combat was defensive and evasive, using terrain and altitude changes to avoid engagement rather than attempting to fight the enemy aircraft. Her strategy prioritized mission completion and survival over tactical victory, reflecting her civilian training's emphasis on safety. Anderson engaged the enemy aircraft more aggressively, using his military training in air-to-air tactics to achieve simulated kills while continuing toward the border. His performance was tactically superior, demonstrating the specialized skills that military training developed for combat situations. The final results showed Anderson completing the mission with superior tactical performance and faster completion time. Sarah had successfully completed all mission objectives and survived the threat environment, but Anderson's military training had provided decisive advantages in the tactical portions of the scenario. Anderson's post-competition comments were respectful and encouraging. "You flew a smart mission, Sarah. Your planning was excellent and your target identification was accurate. The tactical stuff is just specialized training that takes years to develop." Sarah felt pride in her performance despite the loss. Reaching the semifinals had exceeded her most optimistic expectations when the tournament began, and she had demonstrated that civilian training could be competitive with military aviation in many areas. The other semifinal between Major Kim and Captain Murphy was a showcase of elite military flying skills, with Kim advancing through superior tactical knowledge and exceptional aircraft handling. The final pairing would match Kim against Anderson, both elite military pilots with extensive combat experience. As Sarah watched the final competition from the audience viewing area, she reflected on her experience during the evaluation program. The tournament had pushed her beyond anything she had imagined possible when she first arrived at Black Hawk Air Force Base, and her performance had challenged assumptions about civilian versus military aviation training. Colonel Williams approached her during the final competition with feedback that would prove significant for her future. "Sarah, your performance this week has been remarkable. You've demonstrated that civilian training can develop skills that are transferable to military aviation at the highest levels." The colonel's next statement was unexpected and would change Sarah's career trajectory. "I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you after the tournament concludes. The Air Force is developing new training programs that could benefit from your perspective and experience." Major Kim ultimately won the tournament final against Major Anderson in a closely contested tactical scenario that showcased both pilots' exceptional abilities. However, the tournament's most significant outcome was not the winner, but the demonstration that different training methodologies could produce competitive results at elite levels. The congressional representatives and defense contractors, who had observed the tournament, left with a new understanding of the potential value in diverse training approaches. Sarah's performance had provided compelling evidence that civilian aviation training developed transferable skills that could enhance military operations. As the formal program concluded with awards ceremony and final debriefings, Sarah found herself surrounded by offers and opportunities she had never imagined. Defense contractors were interested in her insights about civilian training methodologies, while military officials discussed potential roles in developing new pilot training programs. Captain Torres summed up the group's sentiment during the final reception when he raised his glass in a toast to Sarah Chen, who proved that flying skills know no boundaries and that the best pilot doesn't always come from where you expect. The week that had begun with skepticism about a civilian pilot's place among elite military aviators had concluded with recognition that excellence in aviation could emerge from many different paths and training backgrounds. 6 months after the tournament, Sarah stood in the briefing room at Edwards Air Force Base, addressing a group of civilian and military flight instructors who had gathered for the inaugural session of the Integrated Aviation Training Program. The room was filled with experienced aviators from diverse backgrounds, all eager to learn from the revolutionary training methodology that had emerged from her unexpected performance at Blackhawk. Colonel Williams introduced Sarah to the assembled instructors with pride evident in her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear from the pilot who fundamentally changed how we think about aviation training." Sarah Chen proved that excellence in flying transcends traditional boundaries and that different training approaches can create unexpected strengths. Sarah's presentation outlined the key principles that had made her competitive with elite military pilots despite her civilian background. Her emphasis on fundamental flying skills, creative problem-solving, and adaptability resonated with instructors who had often wondered whether their traditional methods were the only path to excellence. "The mountain taught me that every flight is unique," Sarah explained to the attentive audience. "Weather changes, aircraft behave differently, and rigid adherence to procedures sometimes fails when conditions demand creative solutions. That adaptability served me well in military scenarios I'd never imagined facing." Major Thompson, who had supervised Sarah's training, added her perspective on the lessons learned from the evaluation program. "What surprised us most was how Sarah's civilian training had developed skills we didn't initially recognize as valuable. Her emphasis on fuel efficiency translated to superior mission planning. Her experience teaching nervous students created exceptional stress management abilities. The integrated training program represented a new approach to pilot development that combined the best elements of civilian and military instruction. Students would learn fundamental flying skills through civilian methods, while simultaneously developing tactical awareness through military training. The goal was producing pilots who possessed both creative problem-solving abilities and disciplined tactical proficiency. Captain Torres, now serving as the military liaison for the program, described how the training methodology was already showing promising results. "We're seeing student pilots who demonstrate both the adaptability that civilian training develops and the precision that military instruction emphasizes. It's creating a new generation of aviators with broader skill sets." The program had attracted attention from aviation organizations worldwide, with delegations from allied nations observing the training methods and requesting similar programs for their own air forces. Sarah's performance had sparked a global conversation about optimal pilot training methodologies. During the question and answer session, a civilian flight instructor asked about the most important lesson from Sarah's experience. Her response captured the essence of what had made her journey remarkable. "I learned that competence isn't defined by where you trained or what aircraft you've flown," Sarah said. "It's about understanding the fundamental principles of flight and being able to apply them creatively when circumstances demand it. The F-16 responded to the same aerodynamic principles as my Cessna, just with different performance parameters." Major Anderson, who had defeated Sarah in the tournament semifinals, offered his perspective on how the experience had changed his own approach to flying. "Sarah taught us that there's more than one way to solve aviation problems. Her unconventional approaches often achieved the same objectives as our standard procedures, sometimes more efficiently." As the formal presentation concluded, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that morning when she'd arrived at Blackhawk Air Force Base as an uncertain civilian pilot among elite military aviators. The evaluation program had revealed that excellence in aviation could emerge from unexpected sources, and that diversity in training backgrounds strengthened rather than weakened aviation communities. The new position offered to Sarah involved developing advanced training curricula that incorporated lessons learned from her experience. She would work with both civilian and military organizations to create programs that maximized the strengths of different training methodologies while addressing their respective weaknesses. Her civilian flight school in Arizona had become a model for the type of foundational training that could prepare pilots for advanced military instruction. Students from around the world now came to learn the mountain flying techniques and fundamental skills that had served Sarah so well in military competition. The congressional representatives who had witnessed her tournament performance had authorized funding for expanded research into alternative training methodologies. Sarah's unexpected success had provided compelling evidence that innovative approaches to pilot development could yield significant benefits for military aviation. As the workshop participants dispersed to begin implementing the new training concepts, Colonel Williams approached Sarah with final thoughts about the program's impact. "You've started something that will influence pilot training for generations. Your willingness to compete against the best and prove yourself opened doors that had been closed for decades." Sarah's response reflected the humility that had characterized her throughout the entire experience. "I just flew the best I could with the skills I had." The real credit belongs to everyone who was willing to look beyond traditional assumptions and recognize that good flying comes in many forms. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Edwards Air Force Base as Sarah prepared to return to her new role developing the next generation of aviation training programs. Her journey from civilian flight instructor to aviation training innovator had proven that determination, skill, and the willingness to challenge assumptions could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The elite pilots who had initially dismissed her civilian background had become advocates for the training methodology she represented. Their respect, earned through performance rather than credentials, meant more to Sarah than any official recognition or award. As she walked toward her aircraft for the flight home, Sarah carried with her the knowledge that her experience would influence how pilots were trained for years to come. The little Cessna pilot who had once felt overwhelmed by the complexity of military aviation had become a catalyst for fundamental changes in how excellence was recognized and developed in the flying community. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.